This episode contains detailed descriptions of tragic events and suicides involving high school students. While these segments are presented in an unglorified manner from a historical and folklore context, I am aware some listeners may find these topics distressing. If you or anyone you know is struggling, please reach out. Call or text 988 to talk to someone. Please take care. So I think most people would agree high school was a nerve-wracking experience in one way or another. The constant juggle of homework and wanting to do something fun after school, the stresses of quizzes and tests, first cars and jobs, navigating the complexities of school dances, prom night, and the unavoidable social awkwardness that comes with all of it. Really terrifying stuff. But for students at El Paso High School, these typical teenage anxieties are overshadowed by something far more chilling. Welcome to El Paso High School, home of the El Paso Tigers, aka La High, aka the Lady on the Hill, considered by many to be one of the most haunted schools in the United States. In this episode, we'll explore the ominous legends that haunt the school's hallways and the apparitions that make up its spooky student body. We'll also try to understand why the Lady on the Hill is such a hotbed of paranormal activity by talking to local experts and hearing a first-hand account from a former El Paso High School student. I'm Adrian Mesa, and you're listening to Weird Tales from El Paso. So, I didn't go to El Paso High. I was a quote-unquote West Side kid who went to Franklin High School instead. Go Cougars! But when it comes to El Paso High, it doesn't really matter which school you're from because you always find out about its haunted reputation one way or another. I still ended up there a few times, usually during Friday night football as part of Franklin's marching band. Or one year I went with the Franklin Choir, and another time, my friends and I won second place at a Battle of the Bands hosted by El Paso High. Real good times. Even though I've never experienced anything overtly paranormal at El Paso High School, that doesn't mean I haven't been taken aback by the place. The epic Greco-Roman architecture designed by Trost and Trost, with its massive Colosseum-like pillars and stairs, it isn't imposing enough on its own, especially at night. The evening I spent there with the choir was particularly unnerving, when a group of us snuck away between performances to explore the halls of the school. Again, nothing overtly paranormal, except for some possibly unexplained footsteps. But there was no denying the unease and the feel of the place, especially near the big stuffed tiger. After existing under different names and as part of some of El Paso's earliest schools, most prominently as the high school on the second floor of El Paso Central School in 1884, El Paso High School was officially founded as we know it today in 1916. Also known as the Lady on the Hill for its commanding spot on the side of the Franklin Mountains, overlooking downtown El Paso and Ciudad Juarez along the U.S.-Mexico border, the school has a very storied past. A major historical highlight that I think is worth mentioning happened in 1922, when the city board, under the influence of the Ku Klux Klan, changed the school's name to Sam Houston High School. The greater El Paso community fought back against the Klan's influence, and by February of 1923, El Paso High was back in and the Klan was out. While this was no doubt a great accomplishment and show of the El Paso community's strength, this story usually takes a backseat to some of the school's more strange and traumatic history, some of which dates back to even before the school was open. There's a well-known photo reportedly from 1915 of a strange woman watching the construction site of the future school. The story goes that no one saw her while the photo was being taken, and no one could identify her afterwards. Weird for sure, but definitely not the wildest of El Paso High's legends. However, it does serve as a bit of a prequel to what I'd say is the most famous legend to come out of the school, the tragic tale of the Ghost Girl. That story goes that many years ago, a female student, believed to have been a cheerleader suffering from a broken heart after being dumped by her jock boyfriend, ended her emotional ordeal by slitting her wrists and jumping to her death from one of the school's many balconies. It was an abrupt and grisly end to her life, but not her story. After the incident, reports of a ghost girl roaming the halls near the balcony, often accompanied by a strange mist, began to spread amongst the students and faculty alike. The sightings and encounters became so frequent that a wall was eventually built to close off the section of the hallway leading to the balcony. But that didn't stop the ghost girl from making more appearances. Over the decades, sightings of the ghost girl have continued to pop up, with many capturing her on camera. If you do a quick Google search, you'll find tons of photos of the infamous El Paso High School ghost girl, including the most famous picture from 1985, when Ghost Girl made a surprise appearance in a class yearbook photo. No one noticed her when the photo was being taken, and she was apparently missing from the original camera negatives, only appearing in the final developed picture, which is still displayed at El Paso High to this day. I guess Ghost Girl loves getting her picture taken, huh? I have a theory about why, but more on that a little later. Another famous tale from El Paso High dates back to the 1980s. This story goes that during a basketball practice one evening, the students and their then basketball coach, Toby Tovar, witnessed two heavy basement access doors in the gym suddenly fling open. According to Coach Tovar, he and the team chalked it up to a gust of wind and simply closed the doors, placing a large wooden bench in front of them to prevent the doors from opening again. But a moment later, the doors violently swung open once more, this time with enough force to launch the heavy bench across the gym where it crashed into the opposite wall. Long story short, Toby and his students decided to end practice early that night. After all, no one wants to play basketball with a poltergeist. There's no shortage of stories and legends like this coming out of El Paso High. The long list includes, but is not limited to, rumors of a vast network of tunnels located under the school, tales of the basement having been used as a morgue many, many times throughout the years, spooky mist and oozing slime dripping from the walls, ghostly pep rallies, invisible marching bands playing El Paso High's fight song, sounds of cheerleading in empty auditoriums and hallways, the many reported instances of poltergeist activity, haunted gyms and football fields, and even the discovery of walled-off and abandoned classrooms in the basement. That story goes that during a severe snowstorm one year, Snowden teachers and students decided to explore the basement of El Paso High to pass the time. The trapped faculty and students crawled through the many tunnels and cracks in the basement before eventually discovering old classrooms hidden behind crumbling brick walls. It's said the classrooms were filled with old-timey desks and chairs with perfectly preserved open textbooks and journals on them. There were even half-eaten chocolate bars and wrappers littering the classroom floors. All this suggests the classrooms were abandoned and closed off pretty instantaneously, begging the question, what happened to cause them to abandon the room so quickly and not even let the students gather their school supplies and candy bars? This story in particular is very infamous, and I would say second only to the story of the photogenic ghost girl. But at this point, you might be asking yourself, how true is any of this? Well, that's not an easy question to answer. All the legends of El Paso High no doubt make great stories and local folklore, and a quick internet search will bring up all these stories and so many more than it can cover in one podcast. But if you try to dig deeper into the stories, you'll quickly find out it's hard to come across any actual hard evidence to support most of it, and a lot to contradict it. If you noticed, I didn't mention any dates when retelling the legend of the doomed cheerleader who would become Ghost Girl, because depending on your sources, she ended her life in either the 1920s, the 60s, or the 80s. There are also differing details about which floor balcony she jumped off of, with some versions even claiming it was the roof she jumped from. Which brings into question the walled-off hallway and balcony part of the story. And going back to the tale of the abandoned classrooms in the basement, I also didn't mention what year the snowstorm happened because, again, depending on who you ask or what website you're looking on, The event took place sometime in the 1920s or in 1987. I should note that the 1987 date also comes from Toby Tovar and can be easily found in its entirety on many online articles and in old books and DVDs about El Paso paranormal history. Check your local library. While a quick peek at the National Weather Service shows that there indeed was a massive, and I say massive by El Paso standards, snowstorm between December 13th and 14th of 1987, what the story fails to mention is that the 13th was a Sunday. So to me, the chances of students and teachers being snowed in seems somewhat slim. Not impossible, but slim. And I couldn't find a record of a snowstorm in the 20s that would be intense enough to snow anybody in. But even then, I also find it hard to believe that the school faculty would put their students in such a potentially dangerous situation if they were indeed trapped in the school. Unfortunately, the other tales of massive labyrinths of tunnels, makeshift morgues, and close-up balconies, etc. also don't have much in the way of recorded hard evidence, or are greatly exaggerated from the reality. That being said, there's no denying there's definitely something paranormal going on at El Paso High School. There are just too many stories of personal encounters and experiences to dismiss everything outright.
Famous El Paso High School. We've all heard the urban legends and stories about things happening there, right?
This is Ramiro Galvan, an independent paranormal investigator and founder of Paranormal Research Investigations, PRI, in El Paso, Texas. For years, Ramiro has devoted himself to researching the paranormal around the borderland.
So, you have those type of experiences that are related. They're what I call PEs, or personal experiences. No documented evidence. So there's a lot of things that happen like that where people have those personal experiences, and oftentimes that's what makes them believe that there's something out there that can't be explained. And then, sometimes what happens as well is that out of those experiences, other stories start developing and growing, to try and explain, or maybe, it sounds cool if the story is this way or that way, add more thrill and chill. I know many people who have had experiences there when they were going to school. One of my team members, he would talk about experiences happening when he was in school there, both as a student and as a teacher. I used to investigate with an El Paso police officer with another team, and he told me a story about they had responded to a call that somebody had seen a man standing in the window. And so they went in. Of course, they opened up the doors for them, and they had a dog with them, and they let the dog go. They started following the dog, and that when he got up to the second floor, that they saw the dog go into a classroom, and that he said what he saw next just kind of totally surprised him and the dog handler, because their dogs are not trained to do this, but they said they saw the dog backing out, like, I'm not going in there, and that the handler was like, go in there, and the dog would absolutely refused. So they finally had to drag the dog in there. Of course, they found nothing. And here's the funny part of that story. He says that, they went through and cleared the building, couldn't find anything. So they went outside, he says, and they're standing by the entrance, and they're at the patrol cars, and they're outside, leaning against the patrol cars, and the dog handler's writing out his report. And that the officer I knew said he looked up, and he saw a man standing at the window looking down at them. And he said he turned and looked at the other guy, the other dog handler, and asked him, do you see that? And the dog handler, without even looking up from the report he was writing, he goes, uh-huh. He goes, what are we going to do about it? The dog handler said, nothing. I'm just going to fill out the report, and we're going to leave.
The story Ramiro just shared is interesting because many other El Pasoans who have ventured to the school at night to investigate have reported seeing similar entities standing at the windows. These encounters are usually described as shadow people or vague and featureless silhouettes, quite different from the expected ghost girl phenomenon. Some of these accounts even mention police dogs acting strangely, much like in Ramiro's story. Another quick internet search will also yield many chilling photos and videos of encounters with these shadows by the windows. I'll be sure to link some in the show notes for those interested. Though these stories are typically shared orally or through social media, and therefore lack any concrete evidence outside of pics and the occasional weird video, I will admit it adds a lot of mystique to the tales coming out of El Paso High. Each account of ghostly encounters and odd happenings feels deeply personal and unique, yet all still form a part of the larger mystery that surrounds the school. But that's not to say there isn't any hard evidence at all. In fact, if you do some deep digging, you'll find many records that, when pieced together, reveal a chain of tragic but unrelated events detailing the deaths of 6 El Paso High School students over the course of a month in 1930. The deaths of the El Paso High Six might just explain a few things.
There were some things that happened in the 1930s, the year 1930 there, to be exact, where 6 students died within about a 30-day period. 2 of them were young ladies. One was 16, the other one was 15. The 15-year-old girl, they don't know why she did this. The article writes that she was writing a fiction story for school. This happened on a Sunday. Then she said she finished, she composed a suicide note, and then turned on the gas in her room, because back then they had gas, but didn't light the ignition, right? Didn't, for the lights, and then drank 2 ounces of carbolic acid. Imagine how painful that was. Nobody knows why. There were people who were trying to explain, maybe there was pressure on her, 15-year-old, expected to do well in school, that kind of stuff. But a couple of weeks before that, there was the suicide of another young lady who shot herself also on a late Sunday night. She was 16, and her parents thought that she feared failure in her tests. But the girl shot herself in her heart. Again, nobody knows why. Now, mind you, that we're talking January, okay? So this started happening in January. At the end of January, another high school athlete from El Paso High. Guy was he won numerous contests. He was a football player and a basketball player. And next thing you know, he passed away from a brain hemorrhage. And it's said that it might have been due to an injury received during a basketball game between El Paso High and Bowie High at the time. Okay. But again, this is still in January. Then a couple of weeks after that, you had another guy, 17-year-old. He died in a traffic accident in El Paso on February 12th. He was driving his car, and that apparently he was speeding, and he had to swerve because there was workmen on the street that, they say he didn't see. And so when he swerved, his car flipped over 3 times, killing him. Now, his accident happened on North Vane Street, about 2 blocks away from El Paso High School. And another one died February 13th, the day after that accident, where he fell 2 floors off a Mills building at the time. According to what people saw, this guy went out to the roof over the concrete alleyway at the time that was located between those 2 buildings. It used to be the White House and the Mills building, but now it's like all one building. And that for some odd reason, he was on the ledge, and when his friend saw him, he told him to come back. And that for some reason, he said he saw the guy grasp a high voltage wire. And that's when he fell off the roof into the street. He died a few days later. And then there was another one that, another basketball player, and he died suddenly on February 10th. So, those 3 guys all died within like a 3-day period in February. A 19-year-old died of a spinal meningitis, but the family didn't know anything about it. So if you look at the yearbook for that year, you'll see there's a memoriam for all of them, right? But the weird part is that for some reason, that one of the girls, her picture's not on there. Her picture's not on that memoriam page.
So, before we explore the mysterious missing photo in the memoriam page, let's put some names to the El Paso High Six. First up, we have Frances Blair, the singer who died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to her chest. Another singer, Ben Finer, passed away from a brain hemorrhage likely sustained during an intense basketball game. Singer George Caston succumbed to spinal meningitis, which was spreading at the time, while junior Robert Poe was tragically crushed in a car accident just a few blocks from the school. Senior Herbert Broaddus electrocuted himself before falling from the Mills building in downtown El Paso. And finally, we have junior Emilrose Kieffer, the poor soul who drank carbolic acid. Her death bringing an end to the deadliest month in El Paso High history. And as if these 6 tragedies weren't enough, in 1934, a football game at EP High's Jones Stadium turned deadly when Charles Lemons, a player from Phoenix Union High School, tackled El Paso High's Ed Budner with such force that Charles snapped his own neck. He died 2 days later, his death epiloguing and echoing the tragedy of the El Paso High Six from a few years prior. These incidents have definitely left their mark on the school's history, possibly in more ways than one. For me, it isn't hard to connect the deaths of the student athletes, Ben, George, and Herbert, stars from the El Paso High basketball and football teams, and Charles Lemon's fatal injury on the football field a few years later, to some of the paranormal activity reported in those very places today. These students spent so much of their time playing and practicing on the courts and fields. Is it really hard to imagine that the devotion they had for their games couldn't have left some sort of lingering presence? All that being said, it's the specific death of Emilrose Kieffer that stands out the most to me. Why? Well, let's explore a bit. Emilrose was the last of the 6 students to die that year, but her death is easily the most dramatic, traumatic, and the most unusual. As explained, for reasons we'll never truly know, one evening she decided to turn on the gas in her bedroom heater without actually igniting it and drank carbolic acid after writing a suicide note. The contents of this note changed slightly depending on the source, but the basic text reads as follows.
Dearest little mother and most wonderful father in the world, I don't want to live. I have prayed every night to God to let me die. I am not afraid of death. I look forward to it. God bless and keep you, and I'll always be with you. Dad, give Mother the things she wants, and take the things you want. Goodbye. Love, love.
And that's it. No signature, no reason or motive, just love for her parents and a disturbing eagerness to die. All members of the El Paso High Six were featured in a memoriam page in the 1930 edition of the El Paso High School yearbook. But for some unknown reason, Emilrose was the only one of the 6 whose photo was excluded. Her name is still present on the page near the bottom, below the pretty and handsome faces of her classmates, but not hers, and no one knows why. So, when you consider the theatrical nature of Emilrose's death, a death that would get special attention due to the bizarre and painful method of suicide, and the note eagerly embracing her impending demise, combined with the fact that her photo was excluded from the yearbook page for no just reason, I can't help but ask myself, could Emilrose Kieffer be El Paso High's ghost girl? That's my theory. Emilrose's life ended the same way the ghost girl legend begins, with a painful and attention-grabbing suicide, linking the two in a very grisly and morbid way. Emilrose's theatrical self-demise, coming at the end of a series of other freaky deaths among the El Paso High School student body, suggests she probably would have been fairly upset about her photo being left out of the yearbook, while Ghost Girl's tendency to appear in so many photos suggests she's really eager to be seen, perhaps trying to make up for lost time or demanding some form of recognition? Maybe. Possibly. And sure, it's not the classic doomed cheerleader legend I and so many others from El Paso grew up with, but if you ask me, associating Ghost Girl with a specific name and verifiable history like that of Emilrose Kieffer adds a layer of authenticity to the legend, making it feel so much more real and more frightening than the old story ever could. But again, that's just my take. As I mentioned earlier, there are just way too many stories and legends coming out of El Paso High to share in one podcast. Each account adds its own unique twist to the school's haunted reputation and the overall folklore of the city. One of these chilling tales comes from Dusty, a former student at El Paso High.
I'm a proud graduate of the Lady on the Hill, El Paso High School, and I had a particular incident that happened back in '93. I was in student council, and we had this lock-in where essentially, chaperones, about 4 or 5 teachers, our student activities director and whatnot, They lock us in as a team building, team bonding experience. So we'd be on the second floor of El Paso High, and they'd order pizza, and we'd play games and watch movies and the whole bit. It's essentially like the whole night. I think they locked us in at 7 p.m. or something, and I think we leave like at 8 a.m. the following morning. And this particular instance, it was getting late. It was about 2 o'clock, and 2 a.m. Everyone was pretty much winding down. You still had a couple of pods of friends who were either playing cards, playing Uno, or playing whatever game in the hallway. You had another group that was inside the auditorium. They were watching a movie. And then, so my friend and I, we decided, hey, let's go into the auditorium. So when we did, just to check things out, because we were the soon-to-be seniors of the school, and we saw some movement in the back of the auditorium, which is on stage, the curtains. So we went back there, and it was a group of freshmen, soon-to-be sophomores, playing with a Ouija board. And we were like, hey guys, maybe you shouldn't be playing with that. You want to play? You want to join? And we're like, no, we're good. But we'd all heard about the fourth floor ghost. And now, what was the fourth floor ghost? We had no idea, but we said, hey, this would be a perfect opportunity. Let's go check it out. So we kind of snuck up there, because there were, I guess, metal gates, metal partitions in the stairwell, if you will, that would stop people from going upstairs. And so there was, 10, 15 of us that decided to sneak up upstairs while all the other chaperones and teachers were busy or asleep themselves. And if you've ever been to the school, it's kind of shaped like a U with a flat base, and then the sides of the U kind of flare out. And so we went up to the fourth floor, made it up there, got through the little gates, and we started walking 2-3 rows. And as we got halfway up the hallway, one of the guys to my right, he stopped, and we were kind of like holding hands. Not that it was really dark, because there's a lot of ambient light that is coming in from the outside, moon, street lights, car lights, whatever. The doors in the classrooms are kind of glass pane doors, so you have a lot of way that light could come in. So it wasn't like it was pitch black or completely dark. So as we're walking, I kind of get pulled back, and the guy on my right says, I said, why are you stopping? Let's go. And the guys behind me are like, hey, why are you guys stopping? Keep going. And so he says, and I could see his face because we were that close. He's like, look in front of you. And I said, what? Look in front of you. And he said it quite loud after that. And the whole front row turned around. And that was, I guess, the first time that I could honestly say I saw something that I just could not explain. And what I saw and what others saw was a black mass go from our right to our left. And so it started on our right, moved, glided, if you will, or floated to the center of the hallway. And we could tell that it had a head, neck, shoulders, and then after that, it kind of just draped into darkness for its arms and legs and whatever. But we could tell that it had a chin, it had a nose, so we saw its profile. And then when it stopped in the middle, it turned around and I guess looked at us. Now we couldn't make out any eyes or a nose or a mouth, but we could we didn't see the chin anymore. We didn't see the profile of the nose, and we knew it was looking at us. And we were essentially frozen. And then we didn't know what to do. And then just as it turned around to look at us, it turned back around and it continued to float into the left side of the hallway and kind of just disappeared into the lockers that were there. You would think that we would have turned around and gone back the way we came. We didn't. We ran towards it and went through the middle part, went through the other side, or ran through the other wing of the building, and then went down the stairwell to the second floor. When we got to the second floor, on that end of the hallway was another group of kids and student council that they were telling stories, or I think someone was playing like the guitar or what have you. Mind you, there was at least maybe 80 to 100 kids all spread out through the auditorium, through the second floor. So there was pockets of kids everywhere. And, you know, everyone was asking us like, where are you guys coming from? And we told them, came up from the fourth floor. What'd you see? Because you could very well tell that we just weren't in a right state of mind. So that was my experience at El Paso High. I grew up half a block away from the school, and I remember in the summers, my cousins would come over, we'd play football in the street. We'd walk up to the local 7-Eleven, buy a Slurpee, come back home, and we would see something that we couldn't explain, which was kind of on the fourth floor, a glowing greenish, yellowish light, if you will, on one side of the building, and then all of a sudden go away and appear on the other side. And we just could not tell what that was. And of course, you know, we would be like, are there custodians in there? What would custodians be doing there at 9 o'clock on a Saturday evening? What if it's a teacher or guard or what have you? It just was not conducive to maybe a flashlight being shown through a classroom, or shown in a classroom, and then all of a sudden it disappears and it appears on the other side of the building. It was just really weird.
El Paso High School's reputation, both as a historical cornerstone of the city and as a haunted hotspot in the Southwest, has long been a source of pride for El Paso residents. The school's many stories and legends are some of the most well-known in the city, making them key parts of El Paso's local folklore and culture. They bring many of us together, both to celebrate and to scare each other. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the strange history of El Paso High School. If you want to explore further, please be sure to check out the resources I've shared in the show notes, and please reach out if you have your own spooky story or theory to share. Keep an eye out for Ghost Girl and the Shadow People the next time you're taking a selfie near the school. And until next time, keep it weird, El Paso. Weird Tales from El Paso is produced, written, and edited by me, Adrian Mesa, with original music by Aaron Mesa. I'd like to thank all the guests of the podcast for sharing their stories and expertise with us, and for their contribution to the folklore and culture of the borderland. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, review, and subscribe to stay up to date on new episodes. And if you'd like to share your own experience with us, please reach out at bluelabpro.com/WTF El Paso. Thanks.